Well, much as I'd like to break out my old copy of Dixie and give that a whirl, I've been promising myself and preparing to play 1817 for too long. Um, and, might as well wait until things get a little more exciting before, we start pulling out the predictions. But this may take me too long. I played this, it took me a week soloing it to prepare for it, because this is the 18xx game that I've been most excited for, most wanted to play in a long time. And this is a recent Kickstarter edition. It's been available through Deep Thought and through, I think, maybe the same company that kickstarted it, in small quantities. There was a significant price decrease to get not enough to bring it, to GMT levels or whatever for an XX, but to get a more commercial publication of the game out there. And this is All Aboard that is putting it out. I think they're the ones who do the custom version, the custom expensive versions that are a little bit faster to produce. But I'm very happy with what I see here. Why am I so excited about this one? Okay, so obviously I'm drawn to the stock manipulation XX games. In fact, that was the big thing that caught me with XX. Was 1830 was not just a game about laying track; it was about investing in the stocks, and more importantly, some of the skullduggery that goes on in terms of manipulating prices, but more out of everything, screwing companies over and raiding them, or if you prefer, raping them, and then dumping them, or not dumping them. All kinds of interesting strategies emerged from the amount of evil you could do to your companies. And they weren't, it wasn't just, hey, this is brutal, I can just attack somebody or something like that. No, they had to be, they had to be engineered, and you had to set it up, and you put it in a situation where if somebody fell into your trap, essentially, you could spring it on them and take advantage of them. And you might be able to use that same setup to do something else that's just as good, or almost as good. But that's another story. Well, I've played a number of the XXs, and before this existed in any form that I was aware of, 1841 was seen as sort of the pinnacle of the stock manipulations with mergers, and I don't remember everything that was going on in it. But it had a sort of a scripted feel to it. It had a lot of special little rules. It had the national boundaries and such not, as Italy's forming. Interesting stuff, but it got in the way of sort of that pure financial manipulation game. And in the end, it felt like a more burdensome 1830 model. There wasn't anything all that hugely exciting you could do. There were new techniques, that you could take advantage of, but the feel of the game was the same. Well, this one, from the people who like the stock manipulations and the financial play, this was the one that pretty much as soon as it came out, it was like, this is the real pinnacle of that. Okay. So immediately it becomes attractive for that. And why is it? Well, it comes down to a couple of major factors that play together. And we'll look at them maybe a little late. When I do the review, maybe I'll get back to these same points. I've only played it once. I am no expert at the game, obviously, after one play. It's any XX takes, or almost any XX takes a few plays to get used to. This one has some mind-blowing concepts in it. as mind-blowing as, when I first picked up 1830 and I'm like, oh, I can do that. And then, a couple years later, oh, wait, I can do this. After a lot of play, I was still discovering new things in it. Now, I may not be the quickest person in the world, and that's fine. One sign of this is, unlike the modern Euros, which, are like, hey, figure out what our secret point salad sauce is and optimize your play, and eventually, maybe after 3 or 4 plays, you'll understand it. No, they fucking spell out a significant amount of discussion of how to use these mechanisms and what you can get out of them, but it barely scratches the surface of what's going on in this game. It gets you started, and that's what you need. You've got so much room to explore in this that it's just exciting. Okay, so what does it bring about that's kind of nifty and new? First of all, the newest, niftiest thing of all is the concept of short sales. The historicity, of being able to be some kind of normal investor, which, XX kind of makes you big, but with the ability to influence the market and the ability to start railroads, you have that kind of money, but you don't dominate the whole market. There's still an external market that's playing. When you're dealing with the public stock market, this history of short sales in the U.S. is pretty limited until a certain date, So it's a little weird to have them here, but here's the thing. It was seldom illegal to contract a short sale. It wasn't until they became kind of public instruments that it became illegal to do that. And it adds so much to the actual gameplay, and so much that's going on. So the idea of a short sale is you kind of have a negative share, basically. That's how the game treats it. And it's a bit of an abstraction, but, it models well enough, which is to say that when you obtain a short sale, you get cash equal to the value of that share. And when you get rid of it, you have to pay the cash equal to its current value. In addition, any money that it makes during runs or whatever, you collect, you have to pay that money in too, because essentially that money would be impacting the ownership. Okay, so that's one side of it. And that's the really big thing. Another one is this big loans chart. So you saw loans in like 1856. And they're kind of interesting. You have to slowly trickle them in. You can pay them off all at once. And, they become quite a burden on you. But you absolutely need them to get a start in the game. You can't sort of start your companies effectively without taking out massive loans. This game does something a little differently. The loans in 1856 have a fixed interest rate, and you're limited by the number of shares you have outstanding. Here it has something similar, which is you're limited by the size of your company, the overall share pool of your company. You're going to have, that's another thing, you have a sort of a limited expanding capitalization, where at the beginning of the game, all you're able to do is create something that's like a minor company. It's a 2-share company that you own 100% of, and you can't really do anything with it except run it and make your money. But then you can expand it through a couple of different mechanisms into a 5-share or 10-share company. And there have been other games that allow you to expand in a similar fashion, and there's certainly other partial capitalization. But what's kind of interesting here is the more loans that are out, the tighter money becomes, and the higher the interest rate becomes. These loans are $100 each, and the interest rates can get quite high. Okay, so that's one side of it. What else is kind of interesting? The way things are offered, either private companies at the beginning of the game, or when you make any kind of IPO in the game, you have tremendous freedom in that. I played one of the recent GMT ones, not last, where there were kind of you kind of had companies show up in random places. You randomly selected a set of starting companies. They're all exactly the same except for their starting location. And those starting locations are fixed, and throughout the game, whatever that initial random draw is, that's all you're going to be able to go back to the pool from. This one does something significantly different. And I'm trying to remember, one of the, it may be 18OE allowed you to like create companies anywhere within a given country. That sounds vaguely familiar to me. Well, this one allows you to basically start a corporation anywhere where you could legally put a first token. And the unfortunate part of that is the names of the corporations, for the most part, they're historical, but they're not the big boys on this map, you know? So you're not seeing the B&O, the C&O, the NYC. Hey, you know what? A map that looked very much like this, ridiculously like it when you look at the brown New York tile, which works differently here, which is 1830, uses almost the same exact map in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, not all. But anyway, the way that you initially float a company, or either private or a corporation, is you select a starting city and you offer up a bid on it, and then everyone else has a chance to jump in and take it from you. You've got nothing in the, I'm sitting in the first position, I get to pick that best corporation right away. No, it's the person who's willing to pay the most for it and willing to float it with the most capital at the beginning. Which again, there are some reasons why that's not entirely historical. There, are other reasons than just pure cash, but it makes for really an excellent gameplay mechanism to just say, you know what, whoever is willing to bid the most just gets it. So this one has a kind of stock market that XX games have been really, really moving towards recently, which is this flat market with multiple advances. If your runs are heavy, more limited than some of them, and trying to remember what else is up with that. Not a lot of power in terms of like, you can't dump stock and drop the value right away, but you'll see the way that the stock market works, you can still hurt the hell out of someone. In fact, you can hurt someone more so they have the capability to defend their stock. That's the difference. You can't just smash their stock value with no defense at all for them. They get another opportunity to buy it back. And if they do that, they prevent the stock price from going down, and that makes sense. You don't have so you have a very fixed stock valuation during the stock market rounds, which is kind of an interesting thing. And then if there's shares available to the public in the open market, that drops the price, because that's an indication that the big players don't want to invest in it. And if they're all sold out and in players' hands, not in corporate hands, the price goes up, as it would in most of the XX games. What else do you have? Well, you have a whole bunch of corporations. They're all available. They're all the same, and they're all kind of flavorless. And kind of hard to align. Now, it's kind of important because people would really object if the Boston and Maine started up there. But, maybe they don't mind so much if it's the Boston and Albany. I don't know. But it's also kind of maybe pleasing to some people to see these smaller companies in the game. But it feels wrong to me not to have the monsters of that early period and the ones that survived in the game at all. What you've really got is a bunch of smaller corporations that never really became dominant players. And that, to me, is a little unsettling, but that's okay. Like with the corporations, where you can pick any one and put it up for bid, you can pick any private company and put it up for bid during the initial offering of private companies. And here's the thing. Well, there's two things with that. They're probably not all going to get bought. I don't know if it's possible that they can all get bought. Okay, in my first game, they did not all get bought. In fact, very few did. And the reason for that is the strategy guide says they're worth about half their face value. And you're saying, well, why would you buy any of them then? Well, because there's some seed money for them. And the bank basically will throw in money to make up for how much you're willing to pay. So you actually, unlike in most of the games, you're not bidding above the starting value. You're bidding below the starting value for the most part. And the closer you get to that starting value, the better off you get. I think that half value felt like an undervaluation to me. I was playing in 6 players, and there were people who didn't get them. But on the other hand, once somebody gets one at half value or something, well, the others become a lot more. They get too unfair an advantage, right? So we'll look at that as we play it. Trying to think of something else. You have an unlimited pile of track. It's not limited by countermix, which is potentially important. It means you can't cut somebody off by taking the last piece or whatever. The bank is unlimited. The game runs through a certain number of trains. The initial pile of 2 trains is unlimited, as is the pile of 8 trains. Just a lot of weird stuff going on here. And all of it's necessary so that, you're never kind of, or most of the game mechanisms will not shut you out due to like a lack of available components. Almost everything comes down to, well, you willing to pay a little more? You willing to take a little bit more risk? Whatever, go ahead. Okay, all very intriguing. So let's start talking about the rules. Fixed rounds. You start with a stock round, you go to an operating round, then you go to a mergers and acquisitions phase where this is another thing. Yeah, companies can go into acquisition or liquidation. Basically, if it has no train or is actually bankrupt, it goes into liquidation, and it's available for people to purchase it. Purchase it into one of their other companies, corporations. Companies can go into acquisitions. They are cheaply stealable. Or you can also actually arrange mutually agreed upon sales. But like everything in the game, you can't just say, yeah, I'm going to buy my whatever Grand Trunk into my belt line of Chicago, and I'm just going to buy the Grand Trunk with that. You can't do that in this. You have to offer things up for auction, which means if you're interested in selling the Grand Trunk to your belt line, well, you got to make sure you engineer it in such a way that no one else can afford the price you're willing to pay. Which, make sure you're not selling a train for $1. You can't sell trains between corporations. You might be able to arrange, instead of selling it as an agreed upon sale, through an acquisition or liquidation. There's some interesting things about that. Also in the mergers and acquisitions, you're going to be able to expand your corporations. Remember, at the beginning of the game, I said they start as two-share companies. You own 100%. Well, during mergers and acquisitions, you can shift that up to a 5-share company. bring the capability to put more revenue into your corporation as people buy shares from it. Remember, it's partial capitalization. And you can also shift from a 5 to a 10. Another thing you can do is merge. You take two corporations, and if they're the same size, 2 or 5 share, they can jointly become the next larger size corporation. And both of those are kind of interesting options. The expansion allows you to put more cash into a corporation. The merging allows you to get a better root that's shared. And sometimes one or the other is good. What I did find, though, was some neat ways of using the liquidation. It didn't really work. Honestly, after my play, my current thesis is very stolid play appears to work very well. You know, I mean, not to the ridiculous level where you're like not taking any chances at all, but trying to keep your corporations solidly on track to pay off their loans and just not fail. But again, that may depend upon the way people play. So, for example, a certain form of stolidness worked well in 1830. You know, run as hard as you can, but then save the company. Turned out there are better ways, but I don't know the better ways here yet. But I'm seeing glimmers of them that are really kind of hitting me hard. So a 5-share company has basically 4 dots on the board. Each corporation has something like 8 dots that they can have on the board. And the only way you get those additional dots, because no matter what, if you go up to 10 shares, just naturally, you'll be a 4-dot company, whether you merge, whatever. But the acquisitions and liquidations let you get additional dots. There's also a private company that gives you a dot. Okay. The bank. So, each time you take a loan out, you get $100 and you get one of these cubes on your corporation. You can only have as many cubes as you have shares available for that corporation. And you'll see that here. If it's a 2-share company, there's 2 boxes. If it's 5-share, there's 5. If it's 10-share, there's up to 10. Nice components, by the way. Very silky material, cleans easily. You're allowed to take as many loans as you want up to your limit. You're not forced to this. I can only take 1 loan per turn. That 56 forces, which means you got that train you want out there. You want to put your life in hock for it? Go for it, man. Buy that Lamborghini. But the more people who have loans, the higher the interest rate moves. And this is set at the beginning of each operating round. For the most part, the privates do not pay out an income. There's a couple exceptions. The 3 mail contracts each have just an income value. And in fact, that's all they do, and they run for the entirety of the game. Nothing drives the privates away, although there are privates that there's no reason to leave in the game after they use their capabilities. So like the coal mines, once they use their tokens, there's no reason. This one, once it gives you its train station, it's gone, you know. Okay. We can go into the specifics of the different private companies. I talked about this. Oh, yeah. So at the end of your turn, you pay your interest. At the end of each operating round, you pay your interest. If you don't have the cash to do so, maybe you have to take out another loan. If you can't afford to make the money at the end of your operating round, you go into liquidation. And that loan is the responsibility of the president of the corporation to pay off. Okay? The game does not require you have a train on your company. But the game is very harsh to you. So like most XXs, the bankruptcy route is, oh look, I don't have a train. Oh look, I have to buy a diesel out of my pocket and I'm dead, you know, or whatever. In this one, you can let companies fall into liquidation by just not buying that last train. But you cannot let the loans go away. And this is a much, much more sensible thing. And in fact, when the corporation's in liquidation, as long as you don't have a big loan debt, you might get most of your money back. Because the track and perhaps trains that you have are well worth it for someone to buy at a reasonable price, and especially if you've been struggling and can't get your stock value up. Okay, I need to take a sip of water and a little bit of break. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to make this through in one breath of air anyway. There aren't a lot of different private company types here. Some of the games have a lot of different special abilities. There's a fair number. I mean, there's enough private companies. There could be a whole lot. Let's start taking a look. So there's the 3 coal companies. They each have tokens which they can place. When they first build Yellow Track going into a mountainous region, they don't have to pay the $15 if they place a coal token there. And then from then on, that tile can no longer be upgraded. It stays yellow for the game, but it's got basically a $10 doinker on it. There are no doinkers in the game. That doesn't cost you any train capability to run through, if I understand things correctly. The bridge companies. Okay, I didn't play with those. I think they're similar. If you're running on a river, you can avoid the $10 fee for building the river. And you can place it, so this is a little weird. The owning company can play one or both in any time during its operating turn. Okay, so I think if I understand this, the bridge companies allow you to avoid the bridging fee no matter what. And you are allowed to play bridge tokens on Louisville, Cincinnati, or Charlestown. And there's one for each. If that city doesn't have a bridge token, and that'll increase the value of that city for $10 for everybody's trains that run through it. The Mountain Engineers. You have the coal companies here? They haven't listed them yet. The Mountain Engineers, every time you build track in a mountain hex, you have to pay the $15 generally. You get $20 back in the corporation's pocket. Now these have to be in a corporation's hands, and they get into a corporation's hands a little differently than you're used to. You don't buy them from yourself. You use them as part of the floating capital in your initial offering for the corporation. We'll get to that in a bit. It's been a while since I've done that because, you basically get rid of all your privates early in the game and into corporate hands. Let's keep looking. The train station gives whatever corporation gets it just an extra train station of that company. And, it's still limited to 8. I had one corporation get to 8 train stations. And that was a corporation, let me think, where basically one corporation failed, was taken by another corporation, that other corporation failed, and was taken over by a newly started third corporation. So it's not trivial to get there. The coal mine companies, let me make sure I've got them. When you lay track in any mountain hex that's adjacent to a city or red offboard location, not any mountain hex, you may play the coal token, and it allows you to build there free, and then from then on it's non-upgradable and it's worth $10 extra. So I was close. And the mail contracts are just a cash payout to that corporation at the beginning of every operating round. Okay. Public corporations, this is their base value. At various different phases of the game, you're able to start different size corporations. At the beginning of the game, it's only a 2-share company. At the end of the game, you're only allowed to build 10-share corporations. The bank is infinite. You're looking for total value of stocks and cash on hand. Corporate holdings don't count. Standard XX stuff there. Let's take a look at the phases. They're going to be familiar to most people who are used to XX. And I would strongly suggest if you're not comfortable with XX, stop. This one, there's no reason to be watching this. Go look at my 1830 or somebody else's videos. This is, unless you're just using me to fall asleep. Okay, so yellow track is in phase 2. This is when the 2 trains are available. Remember, there's an infinite number of them. Everything's at its lowest value. Corporations can hold 4 trains. New corporations only start with 2 shares. When the first 3 train is bought, how do you get there through the infinite layer? Well, as soon as the first 2 train is bought, as soon as the first stock operating round happens, all the 2 trains are retired from the game at the end of that first operating round, and all the permanent trains are on the backs of those and get sorted and put into the pile. And there's a whole bunch of them. Okay. In between the 2 and the 3, there's a 2+ train, which shows up just behind those 2, that infinite pile of 2 trains. So there are some cheap trains, there's 4 of them, available to players after that first operating round, or they're to bone players. Once the first 3 train is actually bought, the 2+ are gone and somebody buys that. We go up to the green track, and we have the green values here. And new companies can now be started at 2 or 5 share. First 4 train is going to crash the 2 trains. No more than 3 trains per corporation at this point. Corporations can only start at 5 shares. And the 2+ trains will not be allowed to be bought or sold. It's possible there's one in the open market. How can you sell them? Am I missing something? Are you able to exchange trains? No. Yeah, so I don't know what is up with selling trains. You're not allowed to sell trains for any reason. So that may be a leftover from an earlier version of the rules, but and they'll be discarded, rust, at the end. But it happens at the end of your own operating round. So basically what happens with those 2+ trains is when the 4s are bought, all the 2s disappear, but the 2+s get one more run. Phase 5, this is going to be the first permanent trains. They get you the brown track. These hexes, I'll be getting the brown value on them. And new corporations can start as 5 or 10 share corporate companies. The 10s have been added now. Phase 6 is the first 6 train. This doesn't add the grays, which kind of confused me. I'm used to the 6 train adding grays and moving this up. Not in this game. You're shifted to only 10 share companies though, and corporations can only hold 2 trains. The 6 trains will kill the 3s. Similar to an 1830 flavor here. The 7 train. Okay. This adds the gray track. The gray values here. No more than 2 trains. Only start at 10 shares. Yes, and this is the 6. First 8 train kills the 4 trains. There's no trade-in or anything like that. Companies... Okay. When the first 8 train comes out, it triggers the end of the game. It outlaws all short sales, so you cannot short sell companies anymore. Although if you have short sales in play, you get to keep them until you redeem them. And there are an infinite number of them. And like I said, it kind of triggers the end of the game. I believe there's 3 operating rounds that follow the purchase of the first 8 train. And they kind of fiddle with the regular order of play. The regular order is stock round, operating round, mergers, operating round, mergers, stock round. The final stock round can get eliminated, if I recall correctly. That's the kind of thing I gotta look up. The game, as written, holds 7 players, but then one of the options is, hey, why not up it to 12? You don't need a lot of cash to start a corporation at the beginning of the game. It might work. I don't know. I really don't know. But it is kind of interesting to have a game that holds 7. 35 holds 7. I don't know of too many others. And this one might hold more. Obviously, 18OE holds more players. Okay. The initial auction. How does this work? Whoever has the initial priority. Well, first thing is $200 in what's called seed money is there. The bank is willing to put that up towards starting private companies. Whoever has the priority picks one of those private companies if they want. They could pass. And makes an initial bid, which must be a multiple of 5. And that initial bid plus the seed money has to be at least the value of the private that you're bidding on. So I could bid $5 on this $120 one. I'm saying the bank will put $115 on me, and help me with it. And if no one bids higher on that, I will get that seed money to help pay for that, really expensive private. So obviously, if there's a weird sort of situation where, you might want to bid on the bigger ones first. And there's no limitation on order. They're resolved when they're resolved. You don't have to wait until other companies drop or anything. And in fact, they don't all necessarily get sold. Okay. Once a player passes, he's no longer involved in the bidding. And bids have to be in quantities of $5. 1830 had a fucked up way of the rule. I believe the way it was worded, you had to bid at least $5 over the last bid, but you could bid like $7 over and really kind of screw with people's money in a very fiddly sort of way. This doesn't happen. The seed money will be paid out of here in addition to whatever the player bid, and they get the company, whoever the winning player is. Then the next person from the person who started the bidding on that private company gets to put the next private company up if they wish. Eventually the seed money runs out, and now your bids are close to the full value of the private. We can do some analysis on this. So 6 players with $200 each. Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, if people want the privates, they can buy them. But unlike most of the XX games, those privates do nothing for you if you don't have a corporation. So you don't want to run all your money out for a various number of reasons. Even if you could start a corporation, and you could with just the major mail contract, it would pretty much immediately collapse. Well, maybe not. No, it wouldn't. You could loan. Very interesting. Okay. So I've got some interesting ideas now. I don't think they're good ones. Once the initial auction is done, once nobody is putting any more of these up to bid, the remaining private companies disappear. If there happens to be any seed money left, and that seems unlikely, that goes back to the bank. I think chances are people will put something up for the seed money. But if there's like $5 left, and maybe this one's gone, and the cheapest thing is a 40, do you really want to pay 35 on the 40? The game seems to suggest they're worth about half their value. I don't know. Oh, I didn't talk about the Pittsburgh one. Whoops. And that's one I didn't get in my game. I didn't use it, which kind of screwed up the game. The Pittsburgh allows the owning player to drop that Pittsburgh yellow tile during his tile laying phase. This counts as his yellow tile lay, but he doesn't have to connect to anything. And it's not reserved, which means somebody else could build Pittsburgh without that token. And it becomes a kind of interesting thing. So like if you started a company in Pittsburgh and somebody else owns that, you're asking for problems. Because this becomes a B track, which are these guys. They're worth a little bit more at the beginning. Remember, most are worth 20 at the beginning. And they continue to be worth more, going up to $80 spaces at the end. And because there's no limit on the number of tracks there, adding that extra B city doesn't, put you into some kind of conflict or anything where someone, where you're going to be fighting someone for control of who gets the last B city or whatever. Okay. Whew. Let's swap batteries and we'll go to how stock market works. It works more or less the way it does in most XX games, which is the last person to do something, the first person to pass after, and then everybody else passes after them. That first person to pass gets the priority, and that means they're going to get to do the first thing. It's less important in this game than it is in most, though. You'll see why. It is still possible to dump a flailing company on someone, though. So it is one thing to keep in mind. There are companies you do not want to hold. It's just harder to gain much by raping a company. So it's going to be a long-term destruction of the company by running it for too much money. All right, for the stock round itself, when it's your turn in a stock round, you may sell as many share certificates as you like. There is no limit to what fits in the open market, and that can be a very, very large number. You would say, well, there's at most 10 shares of a company, you probably can't sell the presidency. There are games where you can, but you can't in this. Yeah, well, there can be more than 100% of the company in the open market because of the short sales and the mechanism that works them. And I'm going to have to go to explain that, even though I think I passed it by. You're allowed to short sell one certificate. Now, the way that works is a corporation, presidency's out, somebody owns the corporation. The corporation cannot be in acquisition or liquidation, or else no stock trading is allowed on it in those situations. It's got to be in the white area. What you do is there's going to be a notional stack of these short certificates and additional shares in the open short market. If you choose to be the first person to short sell whatever, I go grab these. You will take one of these into your certificate hands. You will drop one of these into the open market. I've got privates in the way right now. And you'll take the cash value of that current stock out of the bank. So, what you're doing is you're saying, yeah, I just get the value of selling a share. I create it out of nowhere, but I am promising that sometime later in the game, I will make up its value at that point, right? And I will make up for all the dividends that it pays out in the interim until I finally buy it back. Okay. Then you're allowed, in addition to selling shares and doing a short sale, to either buy a certificate from either the open market or a corporation's charter. The money in the open market goes to the bank, the money in the corporation charter goes to the corporation. Or you can start an IPO. We'll talk about IPOs in a bit. Remember, they open up a bidding war. Okay. Or you can choose to act for one of your corporations. If you do that, you're allowed to do the following. You can take as many loans as you're allowed to take, up to that amount. And then you're allowed to buy as many shares of that company's stock as are in the open market for the company. This is like price protection. Well, not like price protection, but like the share redemption mechanism in 1870. Except you can swoop them all up, which kind of makes up for the price protection. And it basically works the same as the price protection because the way stock value prices change. When you sell a bunch of shares, it does not change the stock value of the corporation. It does take a lot of the cash out of the corporation and is generally an iffy thing to do, but it prevents the stock value from degrading. And you will see in the play of the game that those stock values are exceedingly volatile if no one wants to buy them. You can pass if you wish, and that works as normal in an XX game. Okay. There is a certificate limit. Oh, there's a share limit. Wait. Fuck. I screwed up in my game. I don't know if I like that. Okay. You have a certificate limit in the game based on the number of players, and I believe it's against the current number of players in case somebody goes bankrupt. And then something I screwed up, which is you're limited to 6 shares of a 10-share company, 3 shares of a 5-share company, and 2 shares in a 2-share company. And I do not like the implications of that. I really liked I let people hold as many shares as they wanted, and that means you could hold more than 100% of a company, which is just awesome. I'll try playing it by the rules this time, but I was very excited by, I did not see that rule. I looked for it because, but when I see share limit, I should have known. If you have a regular and a short share at the same time, you have to throw them both into the open short interest section. Basically, the short share is now canceling out that extra share that you have in your possession, and they both go back up here in case somebody wants to short again. It's important that they cancel out. You have to buy a share and have it in your possession to get rid of your short share. You can temporarily go above the limit by losing a presidency or do a merger. If this happens during your stock round, you have to rectify it. But you can end up temporarily over the certificate limit or maybe over the share limit. I'm not sure about that. Shouldn't be able to. Okay. Selling stock. You can't sell a 2-share company because it's just the presidency, and you can never sell the presidency alone to the bank pool. You can sell the presidency as long as someone can give you the 2 shares that it represents out of their own holdings, and now they're the president. Sales, even by the president, don't affect the share price. Yeah, you can lose the presidency, normal on anything. Okay, short selling. The corporation has to have at least a 5-share company. The game is limited under the basic rules, no matter what the size of the company, to 5 shares of short shares. And I'm going to play that way. I'm a little scared of playing with the 10 shares because it's already a huge hammer blow when everybody decides, hey, that company sucks. It's not going to make money. Let's all drop it. And it just doesn't have the cash to pick up those shares. All kind of horrible stuff happens. You can't short sell something in the same round that it formed in an IPO, which is important because it's going to lose money in that first round, as in usual in XX. So like it would seem like an optimal time. You can't short sell if you have any shares in the company. You have to sell them first. No hedging. If a company is in the gray box, probably our liquidation too, you cannot short sell it. I don't know why you would want to liquidate. It's not worth anything. But this basically has no value. It has sort of a weird nominal value for corporations, but at least that's my understanding, but I've been wrong. Phase 8, you can't short sell anymore. Okay. A short sale is considered a sale, so you cannot buy shares in that corporation in the same stock round. Buying shares, the presidency must be owned by someone. You have to maintain your certificate and share limits. You can't have sold that stock earlier in the stock round, and you're allowed to buy 1 certificate per stock turn. You cannot buy in the gray area. I don't think you can sell in the gray area either. Correct. And the money goes either to the bank or the company charter. This can cause a presidency change as normal. Okay, a new company IPO. This is a weird mechanism, kind of like the initial bid on the privates. You select a company that's not in play, put the station marker on any available space for a station marker, including an open, untiled city that's got a dot there. At this point, you auction the president's certificate for that corporation. You may bid $5 within $5 multiples anywhere between $100 and $400. And that's going to be this red thing here. This is your bid on the president's certificate. So if you buy the president's certificate, which is 2 shares at $100, it's $50 a share. If it's 2 shares at $200, it's $400 for the two shares at $200 each. The company's stock market goes in its appropriate location for the bid for the stock on the stock market, rounded down. But if you bid 400, you get to own it. That's generally not a good idea. The corporation will be funded and operational when you buy that presidency. You do not have to sell any additional shares. It may be wise late in the game. I had 2 companies fail on their IPO where they dropped into liquidation immediately. So we're expecting some really piss poor play in my case. Now, in addition to any cash that you want to pay for your winning bid, you can use the face value of private companies you personally own. So, if I bid $100, $50 a share, and I have the Mountain Engineers, I could pay $60 plus the Mountain Engineers to the corporation. And you basically float the corporation with the private company. This is the only way you get private companies into corporate hands. although they can move from one corporation to another when a corporation's acquired or merges. They're basically staying with the same corporation. They're just that corporation no longer exists as an entity. Okay. Here they kind of repeat what was there. Stock round ends when everybody passes. Oh, I missed something. Okay, when you start a new corporation, you get the station marker that you placed on the map for free. If you're a 5-share corporation, you have to buy a station marker for $50 from the corporate treasury. And if you're a 10-share corporation, you have to buy, 3 additional station markers for $150. Huh. Is that what I remember? I think I fucked that up in my game. I think I was only buying 2 for $100. Okay. And these have to be done before the end of the stock round. The corporation can take a loan as a company action in order to pay for those station markers. The station markers themselves, you just owe that, and it doesn't hurt you take any actions in and of itself. And then whoever started the IPO auction, even if he didn't get to start the company, the next player gets to go in his normal order. Okay. At the end of the stock round, when everybody passes, the prices are manipulated. If any corporation has 100% or more of its shares held by players, that doesn't mean there's none in the bank pool or in the corporation, because short sales can create more than 100% of the shares outstanding. It moves forward 1 space to the right. If there are any shares in the open market, the corporation moves to the left 1 space for each share in the open market. And that's how it gets devastating, okay? Because let's say there's investors in a company and it looks like it's going to fail to make money. And people sell off their shares into the open market, and they sell off all the short sales. You could be looking at like 130% of the company sitting in the open market. And that's going to move this thing back, like 13 spaces. I saw moves of 8 spaces, which is pretty damn big. And it might have been on a 5-share company where all the shares were out in there. I don't think that was the case. I think it was only on a 10-share company. But yeah, you can severely impact the stock value if no one's willing to pick those shares up. And those shares are being short sold for a reason. So probably even the owner isn't too thrilled with picking them up. And the corporation isn't that thrilled with picking them up because he could get them real cheap soon. Okay. Let's pause and we'll go into the operating round rules. And I'm really pissed about that share limit. I missed that and thought that was one of the cooler things in it. I kind of like games where you're able to hold like 100% of the company. The operating rounds. So, very similar to most XXs. You have a choice between 1 and 2 track tiles on every turn. One of them, and only one, can be an upgrade. And you have to pay $20 if you want to play that second track tile. So, you're allowed to place a single station marker. Now, remember, you paid your station markers up front. You don't have to pay them again. And this is something I've seen in a couple of the more recent designs where, a company has the station markers. They can just play them as they like. You don't really get to move them usually unless you acquire the same station marker. You run your trains. You have a choice of paying full, half, or fully swallowing the whole dividend amount. You're allowed to buy trains. You have to pay your loan interest. And then you have the opportunity to repay loans. All throughout this, you can take out as many loans up to your limit that you wish. For example, to pay for the extra track or some terrain, or to pay for a train or some trains. Okay. So let's see what we got here. The kind of track used, and I probably should have gone into this before, is the non-curved track. It doesn't matter what direction you go into a space. So you come in this way, you can turn that way, which is kind of a big deal. Upgrades have to maintain the track that's already on the board. You're able to play a station marker into any circle you can reach. Note there's no circle in Toronto. It's a city that you can pass through that doesn't that can't be blocked. You can't run through the red areas. Standard stuff here. Trying to think what else. So, like in most XX games, you can't run this different trains or the same train over the same track. You are able to hit multiple cities. You are able to hit a city with multiple trains. One notable difference from 1830, at least, is NYC. This counts as one city, even though it has two separate dots. It's the only case where there's two separate dots on a city. It's just a special case in this game. So you're not going to be able to run that New York to New York run that's beautiful in 1830. You have the choice of how much dividend to pay. Okay. If you withhold the dividend, it all goes in your company charter and you fall back one space. Pretty standard. The stock effect of paying full or half dividends, a lot more games are starting to come up with, are starting to use this mechanism. I don't think it started here. Which is, you make a decision whether you pay full or half. If you pay half the money goes into the company charter, the other half gets paid out as per the share values. And if you pay full, all the money goes out to the share values. It doesn't matter which one of those you choose, however much you pay per share is compared to your current stock value. If you equal or exceed your current stock value, you move forward one space. If you equal or exceed double the stock value, you move forward two spaces. It stops there in this game. There's no big screaming out of out of the poor zone of the stock market in this game. Again, you know, that tends to be more in the engineering games where you want to save up money and make it all at once. I'm okay with it either way. You're allowed to buy trains as long as you have limit available from you. Okay, you are allowed to buy them from other public companies. So I thought you were not in my first play. Wow, there's a couple of things that I did not see these, and I have no idea why I missed these, because these are two things that I've looked for in the rules, and now rereading it with you, y'all, is actually catching me some things that I would have played very, very differently. And I had a very interesting game because of these things. The fact that I couldn't transfer trains from one company to another except through mergers was really interesting. However, I played that wrong. Apparently you can shift them. New trains from the bank come off the top of the train stack. If they're in the open market, they can be purchased at face value. And then see, it doesn't say it, but then it gets to here. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't see this. If the public company is not in liquidation, you can pay the other company anything as long as it's at least $1. And the presidents of both companies agree. So yeah, you're fully capable of raping in this game, and I did not think you were. And I was incredibly impressed with two factors of the game that I played. One was the two things I've gotten wrong: the unlimited stock value, number of shares you could hold, which helps you protect your stock value from decreasing. Because if you can only hold, 60% of your company, then you have to make the corporation protect the stock value. And corporations are often low on cash, and it's a hard decision to make. And then this not being able to transfer trains between corporations really made for a very different flavor of game than I am used to in an XX game. There are other games where you can't transfer them with great damage. Like you have to pay face value or something, and that's usually a pretty limited hit. So that's interesting. Okay. Like I said, though, you don't have to buy a train. And if you don't buy a train, you'll go into the liquidation space and you'll be taken care of over here. And I feel like I don't understand, like, whatever I learned from the last game, those two errors, especially the train moving, is big enough that this is going to be like playing a new game now. Which, again, I don't know how, like, these are things that caught my mind, and I'm like, oh, that's really different. What impact is that? And somehow, I mean, I don't know how I missed it. I'm going to blame it on glossy pages. The glare definitely takes away from my capability to read. Computers do it too. I can't read off a PDF or something. Just can't read off my. I have a tablet that I bought so that I could read books. Use it like a Kindle type thing. Totally fucking useless. All I can do is use it for porn, and it's not good for that anymore either. Okay. Then you have to pay your interest on the loans, which is this flexible value here. And you may have to take out additional loans. If you run out of the capacity to take out loans, you may end up in a bankruptcy liquidation, which can be problematic. Well, actually, yeah. You're going to have to pay the loans. You're going to have to pay the loan interest with your personal funds. So if you can't afford the loan interest, you not only go to liquidation, but you have to pay that loan interest out of your pocket. And if you can't afford that, that could end up ending your game. Okay. Then the corporation can repay as many loans as they like. And they're $100 each. Bing, bing, bing. Okay. At the end of your operating turn, if you don't have a train, you fall into the liquidation spot. At the end of the operating round, the current top train gets exported. This is, again, something that is a newer idea to me. It basically keeps the game moving along because XX games quite often get into a position where nobody wants to buy that last train. Like, it's the last Ford train in 1830 or whatever. And it, there's a cost to doing it. I kind of like those pauses and forcing someone to take that bad decision. But whatever. It's like the stock market styles. It's become a much more common thing. Some people are just unhappy with certain things that were baked into the original designs, the earlier designs in XX. When the 2 train is exported, all the remaining 2 trains go away. So they all export at the same time, and the 2+ train is available for the next operating round. Everything else works normally. There's no need to export 8s after the first one has been sold because there's an infinite number. Okay, the merger and acquisition round. So, you're allowed to do a number of things in order, and they're done, well, the first thing that you check for is if anybody wants to convert or merge corporations that are in the white section. Converting a corporation means taking a 2-share, putting a little marker on it, moving it up to 5 shares. You add some additional shares in there, and now there's going to be a round where everybody gets to buy shares from that corporation. If it's already a 5-share, you can flip it over, turn it to a 10-share. You add 5 extra shares, and again, it's a way to get income, to get additional capital into that corporation. A merger is when you have 2 corporations that are 2 or 5 sized, and both the same, and you wish to combine them together. And basically one of the corporations exists and gets all the resources of the other. We'll go into more detail. Then, after all of that is done, and again, there's a chance for everybody to buy a share of it. If any corporations are in the liquidation section, in reverse operating order, what does that mean? Well, the guy who went in there last is picked first. Will be liquidated, which is basically he'll be auctioned off. The minimum bid is $5, I believe, but the bank is it may be 0. The bank is willing to bid 0 if no one else is. Companies in the gray zone are then auctioned off. The minimum bid on that is 10. And this is a nasty place to go. Liquidation, you can end up in there where you don't want to be in there. But generally it either means you've bankrupted your company or you've chosen to let it go without a train. Because you can usually take enough loans out to buy yourself a train. So you may have just made the decision, hey, I'm just going to let this thing die. It's made my money for me. In the gray area, you can drop down there because people are short selling you or whatever. And then all your very valuable corporation might go for just a couple $100 to another corporation. Probably won't go for that $10 minimum if it's very valuable. Okay, and finally, you're allowed to offer sale of a company that's in working order in the white area, and then everybody is allowed to bid on it with their own corporations to try to acquire it, just like an acquisition or liquidation. Okay, let's keep going. Converting and merging, I think I've mostly explained. You can't merge or convert in a same turn in which either of the companies has done that in the same M&A round. Whoever is the president of the resulting merged or converted larger corporation, at that point is allowed to buy as many shares from the treasury of their corporation, their now larger corporation, as are available, as they wish, whatever. And then each player in sequence gets the opportunity to buy 1 share from the corporation. The 2-share merger. Okay, well, when you convert, the corporation has to buy additional station markers. When a 2 goes to a 5, it has to buy 1 additional station marker for $50. When a 5 goes to a 10, it has to pay $100 for 2 additional station markers. And I think I screwed up the initial starts of the couple 10-share companies that I made. A 2-share merger puts 2 5-share corporations together. they will simply have the tokens that they have between them. If they end up sharing a city where they both have a token in it, that becomes a reserve token that they can place later in the game. A 5-share two 5-share companies can turn into a 10-share. But value is interesting in these cases. So when you convert a corporation, it keeps its stock value. You don't dilute it. You're not like splitting 2 for 1 or anything like that, which is kind of interesting. There are games that have stock splits. When you do the 5, the 2 2s into a 5, the stock marker, the value will be the sum of the stock values of both corporations rounded down to the nearest value. So if you have 100 and an 80, you would end up at 180, which would be here. It's right on spot, so you don't have to round down. The 5-share merger, you actually average the 2 5-share stock companies. I'm not sure why. I'm trying to figure this out, right? It seems to me that they're both averaging. They both are essentially averaging, and I don't understand why this one combines the values. Yeah. It's like there's some kind of special synergy when you put 2 2-share companies together that you get some more stock value off of it. You're not gaining any stock value off the averaging, right? So if I have a 180 and 150 company, now I'm at 330, that's 170, that puts me at 165 for the average. My 5 shares at 150, my 5 shares at 180 turn into 10 shares at 165. That kind of makes sense. But if we're looking at 2 shares at 100 and 2 shares at 80, now there are 4 shares at 180 each. Something weird happened there. You make money by combining the 2s. Anyway. After the conversion merger, you're allowed to sell off, like I said. The new president is able to buy as many shares as they like from the new company, and then each other player in turn gets to buy one. We'll go to the company sales and the rules that they work. I got to swap. Concept behind a company sale, which includes liquidations, acquisitions, and friendly purchases, is that a corporation is offered up for auction, and the players, the other corporations get to bid on it. And I don't remember a game that had something quite like this, but I may be mistaken because I know that there were ways of getting shares. 41, I think, allowed you to have shares of other corporations and eventually like merge them that way or something. It's been a long time since I played it. It was kind of a mess. This is cleaner. So a liquidation happens if if you're not able to make interest payments or if you don't have a train. In either case, the corporation is closed and its assets are sold off for a bid. After the sale, any surplus cash, after paying off the loans, is divided among the shareholders. Any deficit is paid by the president alone. Hey, it's a limited liability. Yeah, somehow the president always ends up holding the bag. The bank makes an initial offer of $0, so there will always be a sale. And I believe you have to outbid that, so you have to bid at least $5. Obviously, if 0 is paid for something, then the president is responsible for the entirety of the loan, which can be painful. Acquisitions are in these gray area. I haven't explained something about loans that I should have. Okay, let's jump back to loans. Way back to loans. So whenever you take out a loan, your stock value drops 1 space. Whenever you pay off a loan, it moves forward 1 space. This can dramatically affect the stock value of companies, and you can sort of charge up stock value in loans that you've taken, right? So if I'm at $100 a share, I could take out a couple of, say I'm a 5-share company. If I take out 5 loans, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now I'm at $60 a share. I can presumably buy a better train situation, have more trains than I would otherwise, be able to make a multiple of income, and my stock value that I have to increase, that I have to target for my paying out dividends is lower. So I might be moving forward 2 spaces for a while. And I've still got those loans that I can trade away and gain stock value from. It's just something interesting to keep in mind. You have ways of generating a lot more stock value and of playing with the stock value. Of course, if you've got all 5, you won't have all 5 shares anymore. But if you've got your 60% of the company or 100% of the 2-share thing, and you're dropping your stock value, you've already got it in hand, so you're not actually gaining anything. But you might still be able to get an edge off of that value. So that's something I left out in the loans. Let's go back here. So the acquisitions. Nobody can buy or sell stock that's in the acquisition zone, and that includes short sales. Another company can prey on the weaker company during the mergers and acquisitions by making an offer for as little as $10. Now, everybody's going to be involved in the auction, and the affording company pays the full price and takes all the loans of the acquired company. This works the same with friendly sales. So, liquidation, the loans are the president's problem. Acquisition or friendly sale, the loans transfer to the buying corporation. Big difference. You probably don't want to acquire something that's got a poison pill worth of loans. All the company's holdings, all of that. Now, we got to look at this because the shareholders get the value of the bid. I don't see that here. It's probably shareholders and short seller shareholders settle on a per share basis. The per share is computed by taking the purchase price, or for liquidated, the surplus value, and dividing it by the number of shares issued by the company. If you've got short sales shares, they're just extra percentages of the company that are out there. So somebody might hold, there might be more than 100% of the company in play. But, okay. Trying to see if there's anything really exciting here. Liquidation, the company's going away no matter what. And there's not as much harm to buying a liquidating company, right? Because you don't take on its debt. You're making a bid on its assets only to help pay off its debt. It's in bankruptcy. But an acquisition, yeah. So, I doubt there will be liquidations that somebody doesn't pay $5 for. Simply because you're getting tokens. And remember, those things cost $50 each. But the bigger deal is how much board you can control. I'm not going to go through the mechanistic situation of all of this. I think I kind of understand it. Okay. You get station markers, and again, there's a mechanistic system for assigning those. But basically, any that are out in play get replaced with the owning company. If they share one location, they collapse, and you get it back. Any reserve ones go into your reserve pool on the owning company, whatever. If you have more than 8 tokens total on the board between the two companies, you get to select which ones to discard. And then the company goes back in the box and is available to be brought up anywhere on the board that, there's a legitimate space. Okay, cash crisis. If you don't have cash on hand to cover a payment, for example, you have loan interest due and your corporation doesn't have the money for the loan interest. Now you've got to pony up. You're in a crisis. Some other ones, when you're liquidated, if you can't pay off the loans, if you have to pay a dividend on a short sale and you don't have the cash in hand, or if you cannot settle a short sale when a company is sold. So here's the thing. It's possible for a corporation to be sold for enough money that players don't have the cash on hand to cover that short sale because they know that the corporation they short sold can't make any runs worth anything. So they're like, well, I'll be able to. Yeah, you might end up strapped for cash. You have to sell one share of stock at a time. Remember, it doesn't lower the price immediately, so it's not a big deal until you have the cash to make the payment. You can't transfer a president's certificate from any company. If you can't make the payment after selling all shares possible, you're bankrupt and out of the game. The certificate limit changes for the players, and there are special steps for liquidating a player. Let me get to that in a minute. Because, yes, the game goes on, and if it drops to one player, that player wins. There was something I wanted to say there. Okay. All the players' stock shares, short sales, and private companies go in the open market. If the president's certificate is now in the open market, that company's stock market drops immediately to the liquidation space. If the cash crisis occurred during an operating round, it's possible that this company will not operate at all. If the cash crisis occurred as a result of a player being unable to pay loan interest on one of his companies, all the player's cash is placed on the company's charter. Otherwise, all the player's money is returned to the bank. If the cash crisis occurred as a result of the player being unable to redeem the loans in a liquidated company, the company's remaining loans are returned to the Bank of New York. When liquidating a company that has no president, the sale is managed by the banker and any shortfall made good by the bank. The auction for the liquidated company starts with the player who was to the left of the bankrupt player. If at any time there's a share and a matching short share in the open market, they're removed together to the short share availability. At the start of every stock round, the bank closes any short positions in the open market by purchasing stock from the company treasury, if there are any available. It'll do this until the short sales are cleared from the open market. Okay, let's talk some more about what just happens, though, because this is a little weird. If I'm holding 2 shares of a company, and the president is holding 2 shares of that company, and the president goes bankrupt, I don't end up with the company. The transfer of presidency never can happen here. The company gets liquidated. So it might be possible that I wouldn't mind that company, that I'd be able to resurrect it, that, my buddy or my shareholding partner is simply, gets caught in some kind of weird cash crunch, and it's really not a lot of money, but he just has nothing left he can sell. Well, I may be in the position where I could redeem that. I don't get an opportunity. The whole corporation drops into liquidation, and I just have my 2 shares. That's kind of weird. If it's more than 2 shares, right? If I have 3 shares, when he sells his 3rd share of that corporation, the presidency transfers at that point. No, it's not allowed to, and I could actually be frozen. So I could be holding 50% of a company, and somebody else is holding 50%, and I can't dump it, and I can't sell any of it. Wow, because that would cause the presidency to change hands. That's ugly to me. But I didn't see this happen, and I mismanaged companies left and right. That doesn't mean it's unlikely. The game ends when the first 8 train is sold or exported. Then it goes for 3 more operating rounds. It can also end if only 1 player is left in the game. There are a number of variations to it. The game comes with 5 short sale capability. This particular version came with the additional bonus shares that allow you to increase your short sales so that up to 10 could be done. And those are only available for a 10 share company. Basically, you can short sale the entire value of that company. You can do that with a 5 share company, so why not a 10 share company? Yeah, I'm not sure. And that's kind of the thinking, except now there are 10 shares that it can drop on here, and it's a particularly deadly blow. So I'm not going to play with any of these, actually, but we'll keep talking. More players. Remember, you can use 8 to 12 players. And we've got a chart for different certificate limits and values. That could get you as low as $100, which just doesn't feel like very much. You would be starting companies at kind of the bare minimum. And that bare minimum is painful. It honestly is. You're not going to see the same kind of game. You're not going to see companies starting with a bunch of trains on them. You're going to see a bunch of shitty companies. So I think I would stick to that 7 player. Maybe push it a little further. They apparently never play tested the 12 player game. They play tested the way I play, maybe somebody playing solo, or maybe a few players playing multiple seats at the same time. Getting 12 people to play an XX game, man. I've had trouble getting above 5 when I was in Phoenix, and here it's been even harder. Short squeeze. If more than 100% of a company is owned by players at the end of the stock round, the stock moves forward 2 spaces. This makes it particularly hard to hold short sales. If somebody else is willing to hold those certificates, the price is going up. Well, here it makes it worse. Again, I don't see the need for that. And they add a little bit extra cash per station for 7 and 8 trains because they kind of suck. In terms of they're very expensive. You'd much rather have a pair of 5s or something. I don't see a point to this either. Then there's, I'm sorry, that's fucking COVID and dust. Then there's actually a series of interesting, and I told you this right up, of interesting analysis to the game. And then a little bit of historical about the odd companies that were chosen. It's not like, oh, I got the C&O and everybody knows it. These are, most of them, pretty obscure railways. And you could see good and bad for that. Again, it doesn't tie it to the ones that we're used to and everything. So it feels less weird, even if the name is wrong, to have something in the wrong place. You wouldn't really want like this, I don't know. You wouldn't want the C&O starting up in Boston. You wouldn't, just stuff like that would feel weirder to me than these companies maybe. But it does take away from some of this, some of my, that's the C&O, that's the B&O. That kind of excites me. I'm sorry. I like to have railways that I'm used to being on the map. The Penn, the NYC, everything like that. Well, not in this game. There is a redesign. I didn't look to see if they put more familiar corporations into the game. But again, part of what you're paying for is the components. If I wanted to do it myself, I would have bought a PDF version of the game and just handled it that way back from Deep Thought. Oh, what's left to say? I'm really fatigued from doing the rolls, so I think very little left. I do find that I'm shocked that I misplayed a couple of such big things. I thought I was getting the game down right, and whatever I played was really cool. And now I'm kind of worried that I'm not going to have as good an experience as I did. I really like, first of all, I like that being able to hold any quantity of a railroad. It's hard to arrange. Even in this, it was hard to engineer. Although this game is easier to engineer than some of the games that allow it, like 35 or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. I also really liked not being able to shift trains around. Shifting trains around is so much my strategy in the XX games that I felt so handcuffed. And there are other mechanisms in this game to do that. They're much, much harder to use. They're not these clear, that company can have it. It also means that other players aren't going to be holding 20% of your company if you have two companies, which is very likely, which changes the nature of the investor game. You know, I felt like it was very hard to dump a company on someone. Possible, but hard. If you're allowed to sell trains for $1, it becomes trivial. And yeah. All right, let's sum this up. A little addendum that I wish I had caught earlier. When I was talking about the stock market, one of the things, these flat stock markets without sales of stock moving the price, or with only the sale by the president moving it maybe one or something like that, those are becoming more common because people hated the big grid from 1830 where you could really jockey around playing with the stock values. This is sort of different though, right? It takes that, but there is still the capability of jockeying those stock values around and really slamming someone's stock, and also putting them in a position where they're going to lose operating position. Anyway, I just wanted to try to catch on that after having urinated. All right, let's send it up.